Good afternoon, and thank you, Ira, for the introduction and also for giving an overview of the AI Mind project. I must say that this is a project that we are very proud of, and at the heart of all of this work with preparing for the artificial intelligence era, we have a clinical study that lots of people have been involved in, and I will start by showing a bit of the timeline of this clinical study that really is the foundation of the AI Mind project. As Ira mentioned, this project has run since 2021. Really, the clinical study started in January 2022. The first participant was included the 12th of January that year. And when I made this presentation on the 29th of September, we had completed 3,578 full consultations in this project. All the baseline visits were completed around the 15th of March 2024. And this is a longitudinal project, so every single one of the participants in the study has been seen 4 times at our clinical centers in Norway, in Finland, in Italy, and in Spain. The QR code there leads to the protocol paper that was published at the intersection between 2023 and 2024, so that gives it some details about the study. But what I'm sort of most proud to say is that in the AI Mind project period, in there, we have 935 work days, discounting weekends and stuff. That means that we've had 3.83 full consultations per day in this project period. And in practice, since our baseline visits and the final follow-up visits typically takes 2 days each, we're looking at a figure of 5.75 full consultations with study participants every single day in the project period. So I would say that this is evidence that the funding money has been well spent on this project, and I want to congratulate everyone who has contributed to this from the clinical sites in this project. So what do we actually do? Because this is part of the concept that Ira called AI Mind, the AI Mind concept. It is a fully digitalized or let's say ready for the future pipeline of data collection. Everything is stored in central servers that are ready for sensitive data. All tabular textual data, patient history, social demographic data, all of these things. EEG, digital cognitive tests, everything is centralized and stored pseudonymized in these servers where our researchers log into a central environment to work with the data, analyze the data, and only results, aggregated results, are exported back. And I will be showing some of these very preliminary results just to give an understanding of who the AI Mind study cohort is, who are the participants that have been part of this study for the past 4 years. If anyone is interested in detail in the study protocol, please come see any one of us later and we can give an introduction to that as well. I think also the last speaker will go a bit more into detail in the particular procedures that have been done. So I mentioned that we have 4 European clinical sites, Oslo, Helsinki, Rome, and Madrid. This is a small subsample where we excluded a few participants because they were missing neuropsychological test data or biomarker data, but the total count of AI Mind participants is 1,022. Here you can see the demographics of 1,006 of them, and the most relevant to look at this slide is the slight age difference between the cohorts. You can see that the Helsinki cohort is slightly younger, the Madrid cohort is slightly older, and all of these differences, they really highlight that an MCI, mild cognitive impairment cohort in Europe, is not necessarily a specific cohort. It differs from country to country, from one set of clinical practice to another set of clinical practice, and there are also cultural dependencies here. And this also holds for education, for example, where the Spanish cohort is somewhat different given their history compared to the other countries. But most strikingly, let's look at the row here indicating APOE epsilon 4 carriers. The prevalence is extremely much higher in the Nordic countries, in Norway and Finland, compared to Rome and Madrid, Italy and Spain. And this really gives an impression that AirMind is a project that covers different MCI cohorts across Europe, which is fascinating. AirMind can, of course, overall indicate that the overall risk of Alzheimer's disease in this preclinical mild cognitive impairment group. But given the data that we have, we can also look at more specific research questions related to, for example, this APOE epsilon 4 low prevalence. We have extensive blood-based biomarker data. We're going to look at a few figures there from our P-tau217 data. And we also have this longitudinal follow-up with digital cognitive monitoring, which is data that is potentially very, very important for the future of dementia screening, of preclinical dementia screening. Just a graphical view of this APOE distribution. If you take a look at the right-hand graph here, you can see the division per site for the APOE epsilon 4 carriers, non-carriers in green, heterozygotes in orange, and homozygotes in blue, and the relative proportions in Norway and Finland are much larger for the homozygotes and the heterozygotes compared to the southern European countries.